welcome back to the next segment of the Zero Hour. One of the other big news stories of the week, in addition to our continued pattern of shootings and violence, was the what seems to be the utter collapse of civil order in Iraq. This was almost certainly inevitable. The brief history of Iraq is that there has always been a Shia majority, a Sunni minority, and a Kurd minority. There were some people who suggested, in the aftermath of our extraordinarily unwise invasion of that nation, that this country be split in three, that either Joe Biden was talking about a straight up partition of the three nations, whereas Ali Alawi, who was part of the transition government, suggested something more along the lines of federalization. We never did anything about that. We never bothered. We took the lazy person's way out. One military expert called our invasion of Iraq the worst. I don't remember the exact quote, but the gist was the least thought out military operation in modern history. As a result, it was catastrophic on every level, most of all in terms of restoring civil order. As a result of that, we saw the inevitable tragic and inevitable descent into violence this week, exacerbated by the fact that all we really ever had going for us in the so-called surge was the fact that we were paying off Sunni insurgents so that they would not make the problems even worse. Now, the Maliki government, which is not really a very legitimate government, but we backed it, did two things. One is, I got very tired of people telling me Barack Obama took us out of military involvement in Iraq. He wanted troops to stay. Maliki would not agree to it under his terms, so most of the troops had to go. That becomes relevant in a minute when we listen to a couple of clips. But so he didn't end the war in Iraq. We were kicked out. Maliki did not want to go along with the surge. He did not want to work with the Sunnis. He wanted to oppress them. And there were a lot of the extremists that is encouraged and empowered on the Sunni side are more extreme than Al-Qaeda. This group that's uprising now has been described, I think probably rightfully so, as more extreme than Al-Qaeda. We've allowed the situation to go to hell. So naturally, where does the media turn for advice, input, political commentary? The Republicans who got us in the mess in the first place. So first off, let's hear from John Boehner, Speaker of the House. The Orange Man himself had some words on this. Let's hear them.
It's not like we haven't seen over the last 5 or 6 months these terrorists moving in, taking control of western Iraq. Now they've taken control of Mosul. They're 100 miles from Baghdad. And what's the president doing? Taking a nap.
So here's a guy who supported the worst thought out intervention in modern military history, and he's accusing the president of taking a nap. What does that even mean? But for real idiocy on this topic of Iraq, and believe me, the Democrats and the president have been profoundly disappointing on this issue, but let's go to the man who, as a presidential candidate, couldn't tell you the difference between Sunni and Shia and didn't even know there was a difference. We speak, of course, of Senator John McCain. Here's what Senator McCain had to say.
Afghanistan. Because the President of the United States declares a conflict over does not mean in the eyes of the enemy that it's over.
Let's stop for a second. As we said earlier, the president didn't declare the conflict over. Maliki threw him out. Our guy, we picked the wrong guy. We backed the wrong guy. Backed him since Bush. Keep going.
17, when the final American is scheduled to leave Afghanistan. Please learn the lessons. I say to the President of the United States, get a new national security team in place. You have been ill-served by the national security team and the decisions that you have in place now and the decisions that you made.
Okay, let's hold for a second. By the way, this is McCain's old school in a way that I kind of like. When you insult the guy's team, you're really insulting the guy. So he's not insulting the guy. he's respecting at least that you don't insult the commander in chief, which is something they're into. But that's what he's really doing, is saying that Obama is incompetent. Secondly, you heard him mention Afghanistan. I mean, arguably, look, Obama let that war go on way too long for no reason in order to support these nitwits we're backing over there. But hey, you guys. So let's go on. Let's continue for a second.
The black flags of Al Qaeda fly over the city of Fallujah today. 96 brave soldiers and Marines were killed, 600 wounded. What do we tell their families? What do we tell their families? What do we tell their mothers?
Let's stop here. Here's what we tell their mothers. Here's what we tell their families. We had a party and a president loyally backed too much of the time by his entire Republican following, who took us into a foolish war. And it had tragic consequences for Iraq, and it had tragic consequences for their families too. And I'm sorry we didn't have the leadership needed to prevent that. Is there any more McCain audio?
So it's not too late. America is still the most powerful nation on earth. We still have the finest and strongest military ever. We have the finest young men and women who are serving in it ever. It is not too late. But we've got to have a dramatic reversal of course.
Now, what is he talking about when he talks about a dramatic reversal of course? I'll tell you what he's talking about. He's talking about putting boots back on the ground. He's talking about repeating the mistake that will lead to the same inevitable outcome, because that's the geographic composition of the country. He's talking about having to make that speech to more mothers, to more families, to more people who have lost loved ones for no good reason. You know, this is, look, between John McCain, who puts himself out, I'm sorry, I applaud him for his sacrifice, but to put himself out as an expert in foreign policy when he's consistently been wrong on foreign policy issues, consistently been wrong on military issues, when as a presidential candidate he was asked about the difference between Sunni and Shia, which is the central issue in Iraq, where he was saying we needed to be more aggressive militarily, couldn't answer and had to be rescued by Joe Lieberman. This is the guy telling us we need to go deeper into it. Then we've got John Boehner. What does it mean? I said, I don't know what it means when he says Obama is taking a nap. There is one interpretation for what it means, which is that it is some sort of racist dog whistle against the stereotype of minorities as being lazy. Other than that, it's an utterly incomprehensible thing to say. This is who we have for a so-called loyal opposition in this country. We have a military and humanitarian disaster on our hands in Iraq. We need to get the world community together to help with the humanitarian piece of it and to negotiate a peaceful outcome. I'm RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour.